So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session on generative AI and scientific writing. It's hosted by Dr. Kirstin Krauss, who's currently in Ireland. So welcome, Kirstin, all the way from across the ocean. Kirstin is a specialist in digital innovation, business development, and scientific knowledge production and assessment, and has taken on several advisory roles in areas related to research capacity building, research integrity services, education consulting, artificial intelligence, and project coordination for startup companies. So he's a part-time research advisor for Worldwide Information Services, which is the WWIS, which is who I have posted the website and the contact details in the chat already. And he facilitates research capacity development workshops and services for this academy. Prior to that, he was a professor at UNISA, associate professor at Rhodes, and he has focused predominantly on the postgraduate student development in information systems discipline. So with that introduction, Kirstin, welcome. Thank you so much for your time and energy. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks everyone for joining. As Anne said, I'm in Ireland at the moment. So I've had 22 years of academia behind me, and now basically involved in startup support in Ireland. I've gone through my first failure as well, which is quite interesting. But I'm going to talk today about generative AI and scientific writing. The main focus is just to kind of give an overview of the main learnings that I've done by doing a couple of experiments using specifically ChatGPT, but then other tools as well. So it's basically reflecting on my experiments, and it's just to introduce some of the ideas, and I can say that additional workshops are available. If you are interested, you can make contact with me or with Wiz Academy. So when ChatGPT came out, earlier this year, there was a lot of hype about this, and I started reading, and this was, I think, that got me going was this article basically saying that testing whether GPT-3, which is the previous version, could actually qualify as a co-author. And what was interesting for me is this statement here that says our results show that the system was able to fulfill the criteria with significant difficulties with accurate and reliable referencing. So, the articles like this, but specifically this one, got me going. Got me going on how ChatGPT and other AI tools could, either dilute the work that I do as a scientist or assist with that. I also saw this article right in the beginning, and I think this was the first, one of the first ones where GPT was actually listed as a co-author. But then very soon after that, based on authorship criteria, it was removed, and there was a statement, added to the article that said that, the author realized that ChatGPT cannot qualify as a co-author, although it did a lot of the work, obviously, in the article. Articles like this one, which is more recent, September, basically also confirmed my experiences is that a lot of the facts, so-called facts produced by GPT, is actually hallucination. My daughter, she's doing data science, and a lot of the students, she tells me, take shortcuts with GPT, but it's really weak with accuracy and facts in many cases. So these sorts of articles got me going. I also started reading about policies on AI authorship, and I actually found these two most useful. And you're really welcome to maybe take a picture of this link. But I would say the most useful one, and many of you probably know this, is the one, the statement by Cope, about what is the role of an author, and can AI actually take any sort of responsibility there. The bottom line here is no, it can't. But I was kind of still interested, if I put myself into the shoes of a student wanting to write a mini dissertation or use it, can I bypass, the assessment processes that we currently have? And I think this particular example, this first one, would be quite useful, especially since I know that many business schools actually depend on a mini dissertation as a core part of the research training. Can you hear me? I see.
Yes,
I was just muted.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I was just muted there for a bit. Okay, so in terms of a mini dissertation, I actually played with different sort of case studies. The one was generating a mini dissertation, and as I said, and I don't know if you've heard this, but I know mini dissertation is kind of core to a lot of the business schools, especially the MBAs. And I wanted to see if I can actually generate a mini dissertation. Based on what I've learned with a mini dissertation, I realized that one of the weaknesses is that with generative AI is the issue of theorizing or making data theory links. I then experimented further to see whether I can develop evidence-based arguments from using ChatGPT, if it can actually assist with that, if I can ensure systematic rigor in the process, to help the reader follow scientific inquiry, the writing of the argument, and can I actually do some sort of mimicking of text analysis? And then also one thing that stood out, some people would say it's ethical to use GPT for proofreading. I experimented with that by taking some of my old articles and running it through GPT, asking it to improve the writing. And it actually improved, but also skewed some of the statements I said. So I'm going to reflect on these just really briefly, but just to say that there are additional workshops and things available at a later stage. So the question is, first experiment is, can I generate a fully AI-authored mini dissertation? So what I wanted to see is, how can AI help with the different phases of writing? And so just as a brief introduction, there's a lot more that one can say about this. But, in general, you've got the generative phase, which is where ideas are generated, where there's informal writing, where there's reflexive writing. Then phase 2 is where the reflections and the ideas start getting drafted into an argument. It becomes an imaginary conversation between yourself as the author, the literature and the readership. And then the third phase, there's the editing, is where your writing should be crafted for the particular audience, whether it's a thesis, a paper, a conference, whatever. I wanted to see if AI can be used there or whether it actually distorts those phases. I didn't experiment with peer review yet, simply because I'm not in a very good position to experiment there, but I'm sure there's a lot of reading on that. But this was basically my starting point. The experiment that I did was to take an assignment that I gave to about 1,400 proposal level students and about 40 plus mini dissertation students at UNISA when I was still there as professor. What I did to actually cope with this huge amount of students is I gave all of them the same topic. Sort of a broad theme with broad research questions, and to all of them I gave a particular methodology, which was qualitative case study research, and I asked all of them to use thematic analysis. And at that stage, the main reason for this was just to cope with the sheer amount of students. And so my assumption is that if I use this as a starting point, using GPT to generate a dissertation, that I would get a lot of similarity. What I found helped me to generate this dissertation, was to focus on the overarching structure. Like, for example, what's the importance of constructive thesis alignment, typical writing styles for different chapters. Like one would write in the third person consistently, or one would write in the future tense or past tense, whatever the case may be. I understand the typical headings for different chapters. I understand the importance of transition sentences and paragraphs. I know that you need argument road maps at certain places in your dissertation. I know the value of introductions and what should be there. And I understand the value of legitimization criteria and how to build this in. So basically, these principles is what I use to prompt. And so prompting basically aligned, I try to align with those principles and doing things like developing an interview guide, assisting with ethics, generating research participants, all of those. Now, I'm not going to go into this, I can spend an hour or more on this alone, just to show you the examples and the prompting. And it kind of really helps to understand, what sort of prompting is needed, because then you know what to look out for when it comes to, your students' work. But, and also understanding a typical layout of an introduction of a dissertation. So that really helped me, understanding the structure. And so part of the process was to actually give this dissertation to a colleague. And I said, well, can you assess this dissertation? And this was what came out. And these pointers I actually took forward into my follow-up experiments. The first one was that the sentence structure could have been more smooth. And that's simply, experimenting a lot now. I realized that GPT doesn't really give the overarching flow that one needs, for thesis writing. And this examiner picked this up. What he also said is he would have liked theory to support the research questions, which was a limitation in the mini dissertation. And then I thought, well, my next experiment should actually look at theory. But what was an important thing, and he even picked this up before I started scanning this dissertation through AI detectors and for plagiarism, he said it's a very good essay, and very few lecturers would have noticed it. And in my case, working with almost 1,500 students, it's almost impossible to see to pick it up. If a student knows or a person knows to prompt properly. He actually said, he's got questions about plagiarism, and he says that he doesn't think that Turnitin will actually pick up any sort of plagiarism. It got me, I took this dissertation further, and I started scanning, to see if there's any sort of way to do any heavy lifting in terms of picking up whether it's potentially AI generated. So I scanned for similarity using about 4 different tools. I scanned for AI detection, which I must say was very inconsistent. In some cases I got 0% AI detection, in other cases 100%, using exactly the same dissertation, which was 100% AI generated. In terms of similarity, I can show you now what Turnitin picked up. But, some sort of similarity, but I actually expected much more, especially since I had almost 1,500 students on the topic. But despite that, similarity wasn't too high. But something that really surfaced was the issue around references. Firstly, quality of references. Secondly, to eliminate questionable sources. And what I got is that the training data of GPT is actually depending mostly on open access data. So, and a lot of our quality journals are closed access. And so by looking just at the quality of the sources, one can determine, whether this potentially is a weak or not so weak dissertation. But the main thing, and especially in terms of consistency, the main thing that emerged was the alignment of in-text referencing with a list of references. And over, if you read the literature, it confirms that ChatGPT at least is very bad with generating references, and even worse with aligning in-text with the actual list of references. So in terms of scanning, I took my experiments further. I scanned Turnitin for similarity, got 25%. I scanned I used Turnitin's AI detection, got 79%. There, although I use other tools like Originality said it's 100% AI, which was correct, but then the similarity score was very low. There was actually another scan that I did later, which gave me a little bit of a better assessment, but still, I didn't like the fact that AI detection is so inconsistent, and also to some degree similarity. In terms of, okay, so this is just another tool, that scan for similarity, but in terms of the references, I really felt that, this is a way, if you have a case of a really weak dissertation generated by AI, and a lot of those references are weak, trying to find a tool that can check in-text referencing with a list of references, that would really be useful. It's not called AI detection, but it helps with the heavy lifting. And so here's an example of what happened with Scriber, it's got a citation checker. It picked up 42 issues with my dissertation, like unused references, missing references. So if this is high, my view, based on my experiment, there's a good chance it's AI generated. Trinka is another tool. It kind of does the same sort of thing. And I actually found that a lot of these tools picked up on the combination of scanning, what I showed here, that it checks for similarity for references and AI detection. Many of these tools actually combine all of these. What I miss with some of these tools is it's developed by techies, so they often don't understand the need of academia. Like, they would limit the submission to, let's say, 4,000 words, and actually you want to be able to submit a full dissertation of, let's say, 60,000 words, or whatever the case may be. So there are limitations with these tools, and it's really a case of, I think these tools I want to get out in the market. A very useful tool I found was ReciteWorks. It's a tool that's existed for a long time, but this one specifically looks at your references in text and the list of references and the referencing style. And so, go and have a look at that and experiment with it. But what I found interesting is that AI detectors are actually biased against non-native English writing examples or writing samples. And then there's also issues around ethics. Can you use AI detection tools, if you're working in an environment where most of your students are maybe second or third language speakers? And, some other articles kind of said the same thing, that in terms of AI detection, there's a bias against non-native English speakers. So for us, it actually says, steer away from it. I attended an interesting session about a couple of weeks back at University College Cork here in Ireland. And they presented an amazing sort of toolkit to assist with integrity in AI. They had over 200 participants, I think, in the whole project. You can see the link there and can have a look at it. But the one thing that they didn't pick up, despite the fact that they have over 200 participants, was the bias against non-native English writers. They never picked it up because, like in Ireland, it's an English-speaking country. So, in South Africa, we really have an interesting sort of dynamic in that area. Now, in terms of my second experiment, I wanted to test further, because, as scientists, we really need to be able to engage with theory and scientific argumentation. And I wanted to test whether generative AI could actually do that. Now, so basically, I wanted to test the drafting, and so for me, it's about quality. It's about trying to break AI. I'm trying to break it, to see what it can do and what it cannot do, especially around the crafting of the argument. And so in terms of the making data theory links, the sort of broad process that I followed, and there's a lot that one can say. A workshop on this would actually involve, what is theory, how to test theory, the different constituents of theory. You can bring in, principles of hermeneutics to really look at text. So this is a much extended workshop, but I just want to give you the highlights here. What I did with this experiment is I wanted to see if I can mimic the making of data theory links, specifically to see if I can generate let's say, master's level theorizing that can bypass the assessment processes, the typical assessment processes. So what I did was I transcribed data, which was auto-transcribed. I had an ethnographic interview with 4 Zulu people. The interview was in English, but the accents were obviously Zulu accents, and then there was my own accent. I had a tool, which I can't remember now, but it auto-transcribed that. I then wanted to see if GPT and ChatGPT can extract themes from the data, and whether the extracted themes can align with my research questions, speaking to the whole idea of constructive alignment in your dissertation, and whether I could actually extract relevant quotes from the transcriptions to fit with the discussions. But what I was especially interested in, and this is the scientific side of things, is can I consistently get the same themes from prompting? And should I use all the themes that emerge? And so the short answer for this was no. I couldn't get consistent themes from the prompting, and also I realized that some of those themes I could not use are irrelevant. And it's, you know, my conclusion is that there's a worldview embedded in these, you know, AI tools, especially a Western sort of way of thinking. And then the last point that I wanted to test is, can I connect my discussion to findings and findings to a theory? So basically, you know, here's my transcript. You know, this is what I fed into GPT. There's a limitation, you know, when I tested it, of 10 pages. But you can see that the transcription was actually very bad. And here's just an example of how the transcription was done automatically by a tool. And there's a lot of rubbish in it, like Obama was never mentioned, you know, and the word predator was never mentioned. You know, just to show, I started correcting the interviews. And this is just an example of how the corrections turned out to be. You know, to just show it's a very sort of polluted piece of text. But I prompted, I fed it into GPT, and I was, you know, so AI is really good with first impressions, really good. You know, I was amazed at what popped up. And so here were some of the themes, and, you know, all of them potentially relevant themes. One thing, I mean, you can just look at the prompt here. You know, this is what I said. The following transcription is a group interview from an ethnographic study between a PhD student and 4 participants. The accents are Zulu, but the participants all speaking English. Some of the transcriptions came out incorrect. See if you can infer some of the what some of the conversations could mean. And so what came out with these themes, and then sort of discussions, you know, and if you zone into it, you find it's kind of superficial. Discussions emerged, you know, and so one can actually take that and cut and paste it into a dissertation and hope you pass. Something that, you know, dawned onto me later on is that it's an issue of ethics. You know, I'd never asked permission for these people to feed this interview into GPT, and now the stuff is out there, you know. And so for me, it really flagged the issue of how should we do our ethical clearance now, especially around not using GPT to bypass scientific rigor. But secondly, if you push interviews through there, have you asked permission from your participants to do that? So that was an interesting thing that popped up. What I can also show is I wanted to see if it can actually get some quotes to connect that to the discussion. And GPT wasn't good with this, you know. So like this quote is supposed to talk to the complexity of policy implementation, but you can see it's absolutely rubbish. And that's the thing, you know, as I started zooming in on what the text actually says, I could see, you know, GPT hallucinates, you know, and you know, I started prompting in different ways. In this case, this prompt was the corrected transcription, and it gave me different themes. You know, you can see in this case, there were like 6 themes. The original prompt had 8 themes, including gender dynamics. But after I fixed it, I got less themes, you know, and then the issue of, you know, consistency started emerging. I wanted to see if it can connect to research questions that I've designed up front. And, you know, it in some way did that, but then I get this sort of thing, you know, it repeats themes in different ways. So, you know, as a way of using GPT to analyze text data, it's not reliable, it's inconsistent, you know, it kind of loses themes. What was an interesting one is the issue of gender dynamics. You know, each time I push, I ask for themes, gender dynamics surfaces. Now, my topic wasn't about gender dynamics at all, but somehow this popped up. And what I realized, you know, by reflecting on this is I know gender dynamics is a very sort of prominent topic in the academia worldwide, especially in the Western world. And it kind of forces that theme onto my data. And so I also didn't like this. And, you know, it dilutes my lenses that I want to use, you know. And so that's the sort of thing that you know, as a researcher, I started avoiding it because it dilutes my thinking in a big way. I got this article that says, oh, you can help AI to use AI to self-reflect. You know, I did that and it didn't do that. You know, this interesting statement kind of says what I also picked up. It says here, a more realistic claim would be that GPT can effectively reproduce certain forms of formulaic and predictable reflection that have become commonplace in tertiary education. So it kind of regurgitates, but it doesn't reflect really. I also tested it, you know. by saying, are you sure about this statement? And then it apologizes and just reproduces the same statement, And like, and this is just a screenshot from ChatGPT. The statements, the summaries are linked to particular items in my PDFs that are uploaded to ChatGPT. And I don't like where this statement is linked to in my text. It's not the best. And so the data theory links really started becoming a problem for me. So in terms of that aspect, the theoretical elaboration, this is what I kind of deduced from it, is that it can be done, but it's shallow, it's inconsistent, it's haphazard. I have no clue whether all the relevant data theory links have been identified, and some of the data theory links are weak and not the best to support the scientific claims that I'm trying to make. If I use generative AI to assist with making data theory links, I can only work deductively. In other words, it reproduces what's out there already. I will miss certain things. It absolutely lacks systematic rigor and it's inconsistent. I don't know how the link is made, and I cannot explain the link for the reader, which you can do if you use something like Atlas TI and reflections and the traditional way. And there's a worldview bias embedded in these tools. Generative AI cannot get close to mimicking the principles of hermeneutics and text analysis. If you look at hermeneutics as a text analysis philosophy, AI loses the plot totally. But the sort of scary thing is that I could mimic honors level or master's level theorizing, and if you don't look at that carefully as an assessor or a supervisor, a student can get away with it. At least I could get away with it. AI-driven tools, this is what I've learned, can assist with the initial topic phases, maybe, but after testing that, I also don't agree. I would rather do the topic discovery on my own way, because I want to really internalize the reading. But if you use it, you need to combine it with more systematic and rigorous approaches. But thinking should still reside with the author. You can't outsource the thinking, and generating ideas requires thinking. And so if AI replaces thinking, you run the risk of entering a data collection situation with an empty head instead of having internalized the literature. Or you cannot do a data analysis already during data collection, or reflection is less possible or even less relevant because you haven't internalized, you've outsourced the reflection. But then again, not everyone will pick it up. This is just an example of how AI diluted my own argumentation and my own, because I wanted to use it here to see how it works for proofreading. And so just a couple of interesting examples. This was AI, after proofreading, this was what I wrote originally. I said riddled with ethical contradictions, and then it says categorized by ethical contradictions. Categorized wasn't strong enough for me. Ultimately, ideology was what I said, but then AI said overarching ideology. So it kind of misguided my writing in the act of using it for proofreading. Here's another example, and this was the issue of using literature. Here we go. You see, in our original paper, we said we introduce literature, but after proofreading, it was stated as to examine, how data valence. And so that's a very sort of slight deviation, but it's important for us to say that we use literature, but after proofreading, that aspect was thrown out. Okay. So another example, and there's a couple of these, but just to briefly highlight it, we demonstrate the use of MDA. We illustrate the practical use of MDA. I wasn't sure if it's really practical, but we definitely demonstrated it. So this is just an example of how AI could actually, dilute your own writing. And then the final thing I want to just mention as an example is, can AI help with topic discovery? If you think that topic discovery really speaks to 4 scientific claims, and this again is an entire workshop. We actually have a series for librarians, scholarly librarians, because Many of them now need to assist researchers in topic discovery and the question of how useful or not useful is AI. But in terms of topic discovery, whoever does that need to understand that you need to focus on 4 scientific claims, which really talk to the problem and the topic, the theoretical framework, the possible methodology, and the context. So those would be 4 sort of claims and key combinations of keywords. And I can use different tools, to try and mimic that to help me with the early phases of generative writing. So I could use those tools in combination with traditional approaches like using the library, having good research strategies. And in combination with a scholarly librarian, I can identify articles, I can organize the articles. And to some level, I can summarize, but there's a real limitation when it comes to reflection. Because for me as a scientist, what I want is I want my literature summarized, and at some point I want my citation, the good quotes from the paper and my reflections on it available so that I can feed that into my drafting. And there are some AI tools like lateral connected papers, illicit, that can, and semantic scholar that can assist you with identifying and organizing. But like with the other cases, you have hallucination in the way it summarizes, and you have no clue whether there's systematic rigor. It's all like haphazard, the same sort of thing. So, like with citation dilution, one would need to ask, can your thinking be diluted if you outsource it to AI? Can it be strengthened? As scientists, I really feel that we have a responsibility to be at the forefront of thinking, applying our minds, systematically and rigorously. And one must be careful of outsourcing that. And so if one just looks at the different phases of writing, there are some things that you actually need to avoid it there. Like definitely with drafting. And if you consider writing as a form of thinking and you generate ideas using AI, you actually miss a phase of writing, actually miss a phase of thinking. There's also the issue of AI dilution. There's an article that came out that said that GPT actually has more drift than the GPT-4, more drift than the original one. And my assumption there is that GPT 3.5, the version that's free, actually has fixed training data, while GPT-4 constantly trains. And so what we have now is it trains on already generated AI data. And so there should be some sort of dilution happening. And so those are things to look out for. And I think I'll stop at this, just to show that with the Wiz Academy, there's a couple of workshops that we can assist with. This one I think would be quite interesting. It's not just me presenting, but a couple of workshops, a 2-hour workshop on writing, on topic discovery, which is especially useful for scholarly librarians. We have a session on AI and copyright, and then a colleague on optimizing statistical research using AI. That's quite an interesting one. And then also there's an online series that we are busy with. In fact, the one on the 21st will be on proposal writing and topic discovery, and AI tools will be part of that. But just to show, if any of you are interested, please make contact with the Wiz Academy. And so I'll stop here, Anne, and I'll take some questions if there are any. Are there any questions?
Kirstin, thank you. Sorry, I was talking, I was on mute. I was just saying, thank you so much for that. I think it's really fascinating, all of this stuff, and you obviously have such an insight into it. Do you have a list of all the different tools and applications and things that people can use that have come up, or do you share that, or what is the best way to go about seeing what's out there?
There's a interesting you mentioned that. I actually I can look it up now. I have a list of tools that I've been using for the different phases of writing, but those are only the ones that I've experimented with. There's another list of tools. They call it the cheat sheet. I'll just look it up now in a second and I'll display that. But then also be careful of something that popped up. I haven't read anything about it yet, but I call it predatory AI tools. People jumping on the AI tool bandwagon and producing tools. You pay your $4 a month, whatever, but it's actually useless stuff. It's unethical. It's just people getting into the market. But I don't have a list. It's almost impossible. What I really found useful is to keep keep following people on LinkedIn who does this. So yeah, I'll look it up and share it in a bit.
Great. And then you got two questions there. I don't know if you can see them. It's Mark Smith and HB. Mark, do you want to go?
Yes, Mark.
Hi. Thank you. Actually, I thought of a question, then I thought maybe I was let somebody else go, but I'll go now. Anne's invited me. Thank you. I really enjoyed what you had to say. I wondered if you used now I'm not an expert in this, but there's a sort of a private GPT where you can where they don't share the training data. So do you think that in terms of analyzing qualitative data is a safer way forward, because it just operates on finding themes within in a kind of constrained space? I'm using all the wrong words, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying. You can actually get, I forgot the word now, but the private GPT, you get ChatGPT for your organization, and it doesn't allow the data to go out of the the
enterprise version.
Enterprise, that's the word. Enterprise. I actually read the article, I just forgot the word. But so in that sense, if you use that, you have the benefit of feeding things in, and there's no ethical problems. There's not many real problems around giving your IP away to GPT. But still, when it comes to if you say you want to use GPT to analyze data, I still ask the question: is how can you prove rigor and systemization? You cannot prove it because you don't know what happens between when you submit something and where you get the data from. You can't make those connections, and so that's my concern.
Okay.
Mark?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I think I really liked to I just say I really liked what you said, that if you get ChatGPT to write for you, then you lose that process of writing as first stage of thinking. Because I think I had a conversation this morning with a student, and I was trying to say writing is thinking, so you just got to write, and then that's how you're going to get your ideas straight. So I appreciate that it's a risk of people cutting out a very important step. But thank you. I really enjoyed what you had to say.
So on that point, the session that I attended with UCC, they said, they suggested, from the experiments that they did, they said, go to your students and give them something tell them to use GPT on something that they're really passionate about. And so if they're passionate about whatever it is, biking or art or whatever, start prompting GPT, and they will very quickly see that it's not good with the facts. And you almost set the stage with doing something like that early on when you introduce GPT to students. And then they will be careful in the future for using it for any sort of fact.
Thank you.
HB?
Thank you, Anne. So, Kirstin, thank you very much for that. So I've got two questions. The one, but let me ask the first one, the obvious one. So I get the sense, and I like what you've just shared in response to Mark, is that a lot of people, if you ask them questions, they give you very smart answers back. And in fact, I get the sense we talk to ChatGPT ourselves when we're in these conversations online, because the comment or the remark I get is you must pay attention to how you prompt, and the better you prompt, the better quality data you create. And I get that argument. But with that being said, where we sit, and I get your point, we need to test that. What's the future of AI in scientific writing? Is this a tool that we can use to almost flesh out ideas? And I've listened to what you said, or should we really be wondering about the ability to lateral to do lateral thinking, to really conceptualize, because I get the sense, it's verbal diarrhea, maybe things that are of interest that we haven't read ourselves. So just a few open-ended questions there to you.
I don't have the answers. What I can say is, okay, you probably know this, but right in the beginning, there were two very interesting articles that came out. It said that the one was that an exit exam for both a medical board exit exam and an MBA exam was answered by GPT, and both cases it passed. What got me thinking at that point was, have we been assessing correctly? And if something like that can be outsourced to GPT, maybe we should revisit our assessment approaches completely. And so that got me thinking. And then the other thing in terms of science, what I really believe, and I've been consistently testing this and proving it in some way. If you consider that science actually takes two parts, you have the argument, but in the sort of parallel to that, you have to assess your own argument. You have to build in legitimization criteria to say that if I make a particular claim, here's the evidence, here's the road that I can help the reader to follow to get from the same evidence to the same claim, to confirm or to refute that. If those principles are instilled in our students, they will quite quickly pick up that GPT cannot do it for them. Like if you have data and you want to make claims from it, you need to explain the process, and the process, defend the process, the legitimization process. And if you cannot do that, and GPT cannot do it for you, then you're not doing scientific argumentation. Then you're just regurgitating, stuff out there. So I don't know. I really don't. What I think, in some cases, GPT can be useful in terms of writing, proofreading. But what I experience, and I'm a second language speaker, as you can probably pick up. I have my own Afri English way of writing. It's correct. What I want to say is correct. Sometimes you have these double barrel in sentences and it's verbose or whatever, but it's correct. If I get AI to write that for me, it produces vanilla writing. Vanilla writing meaning, I'm a strawberry. This is me. I've got strawberry writing. Now you produce vanilla writing, and it's not me anymore. It's not my argument. And so students need to know this. And, I don't know. It's no clear-cut answer. And it's such a fast-moving target anyway,
Because the example, no, thank you for that. The specific example, this is my second part that this student shared with me, or industry expert, actually not a student, as an industry expert said, he asked ChatGPT the following prompt: as a critical expert in the field with a world-renowned background, write an academic article on the following and give me the main pointers. Then he take that thing and he give it back to ChatGPT and he said, as a reviewer, from academic perspective, with youth experience, where's the flaws? Put it out. And I used the content in the third round, refined it and improved that. And then he allowed one of his own articles to say, make it my own. And, then you say, send it to a reviewer of a journal. What would they say? And at that fifth iteration, he reckoned this thing is foolproof to publish. Now, what I miss in that whole argument is the scientific logic of thinking. I think it's a cut and paste, but that's probably the reality. So that's my question. What's the future of this? I know you can't answer that, but I think we need to grapple with these kind of realities, because we don't have all the information at our fingertips. People will bamboozle us very, very quickly, or probably already busy doing that.
Yeah, you see, technology determinism is something that's been long, been here for long. When it comes to developing communities, for example, when mobile technologies came out, everyone said, "Oh, you just throw technology into the community; they will develop themselves." I see the same sort of thinking. The technocrat says, "Oh, this is the answer to everything," and they just throw AI at everything. And then you get the humanities, they're not good with technology. They really battle with the technology side of things, but their gut feel says, something is wrong here. But they cannot pinpoint it. So, I have this feeling, something is wrong. I'm going to try and figure it out for myself, for my discipline. But what I can say at the end of the day, I think as scientists, we have a responsibility to continuously interrogate the principles of scientific knowledge production. And this is now something we need to deal with, and we need to continuously interrogate that. So, yeah, I don't know. Thanks anyway for the question. I don't know if I've got all the answers.
And then, if I may, I'm not sure if there's any other questions, Anne, or just
No,
another observation. Somebody else said to me, back to the early point of assessment, the way to actually approach that is to say to the students, go and use AI, and then basically critique the comment and tell me where the flaws are.
Yes.
So you basically, and I think that's a very mature way of arguing, to say stress test. And I think that point you also highlighted here, that we almost push AI into the assessments and then take the next step. But AI can probably do that for you as well.
Yeah, I can comment with two examples there. The one is a colleague of mine. What she did is she put in, all the essays that she wanted to assess. Like, she's got a class of 30. She would put all those essays and she would ask ChatGPT to assess those. But she would have a moderation process. And for her, it seemed to work. She did that through GPT, and then she would assess, moderation, and consistently she would get the same sort of results. And then she's using GPT to actually do that. I don't know. I need to experiment in my own world. But, some people say it can be done. The other thing is, in terms of mini dissertations, one of the critical things that I thought could be really useful was, instead of asking the student to do the full writing, you actually ask a student to generate a dissertation using GPT. But you explain to them the principles of constructive alignment. Like, for example, a review of literature should have a conceptual summary. Your research questions should have a purpose statement. Your interview questions should align with your research questions, those sorts of things. And then you let them prompt in line with those principles and see if they can come up with something. And at least then you've taught them the principles of structuring a dissertation. Now at master's, PhD level, now they need to start populating it with content that is really scientific.
Thank you very much, Kirstin.
Thanks for your questions, by the way.
Thank you. And I like your suggestion on constructive alignment. I think that's very sensible. But okay, it remains an open question. But thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Guryama Ace, would you like to go? I think you're muted.
I've got two mute buttons. That's why I didn't realize I was muted there. Sorry about that. Okay. Just a quick question to you, Dr. Krauss. I have heard of you from other colleagues at other universities, and I just wanted to know, and I'm sorry if you did mention it during this session. I had to unfortunately step away for a while. So you might have mentioned it and I missed it. But just to check, have you got any insight on the actual detection of AI writing? So what methods we can use to detect AI writing?
Yeah.
And your insights on that?
Yeah, there's actually a whole bunch of tools. Maybe I can show that, or maybe I can send you an email if you send me an email. But what I did is I took my dissertation, my mini dissertation, which was 100% AI generated, and I sent it through 4 different AI detection tools. It actually cost me some money, but it was Turnitin, it was Originality, and there were 2 others, which names I can't remember now. And running it through detection, I got 4 different outcomes, which for me, and all of it was AI generated writing, 4 different outcomes. And so that was a concern for me. So which means for me, I won't use it because I will get inconsistency. The other thing that popped up, and I actually mentioned it, is that AI detection is biased against second language writers. And so it will flag second language writing as AI authored. So personally, I will stay away from it. It doesn't work. But what does work is if you use a combination of, plagiarism or Turnitin, something like Turnitin, and reference checking. The big thing where the GPT is really bad is to generate good references. And maybe you can generate references up front and feed the references into GPT. But the real problem is in-text referencing alignment with the list of references. That's really the problem. And if any student wants to go to the effort to make sure that the in-text references are correct with a list of references, you know, I don't think that's so much effort. You know, I'd rather just write the dissertation. So yeah, that's a brief summary of what I said earlier.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much for that.
Are there any other
Can
questions?
I ask another question, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so just thinking around what you just said, the whole notion of unconscious biasness in articles and how one need to work it around from a methodology perspective. Is that not where we should pay our attention? And, you know, because I can just imagine that AI by nature is biased to an extent.
A big way. You know what, I did a couple of experiments. The one I showed you is that, you know, although I didn't talk about gender issues, it constantly extracted that theme from my data. And I didn't want that. That's not the purpose of my research. In fact, what I did is I took 4 of my thesis chapters and I popped it into ChatGPT and I started analyzing that. And each time this theme pops up and it's not the theme that I'm interested in. You know, so that's the other one thing. And the other thing is, you know, I tested GPT and one of the other two, asking it to answer a question in a politically incorrect way. And it refused. My question is, okay, politically correctness has a purpose, but one needs to be able to question things, because power and politics depends on who's in power at the stage. You know, what's politically correct today is not politically correct in 20 years or 20 years back. You know, so questions need to be asked there. And there's an interesting case study, you know, with GPT. It's got what they call guardrails in it, built in, to make sure that it trains on the right type of data, that it stays within ethical boundaries. But at the end of the day, people give those guardrails, you know. I think 2016, there was this case where, I speak under correction now, but there was a tool released called TAY, T-A-Y, and it was on the market for 16 hours. And it started training on the dark web. And it just went haywire and they had to close it down. And the problem there was that similar tool, a chatbot, but it had no guardrails built into it. You know, but the point I want to make in terms of, you know, what in GPT is that the guardrails are there placed by people, and the people come from a particular worldview. And so there is for sure definitely a bias in any sort of generative AI.
No, thank you. And maybe a last thought, because this I also wanted, and I know there's some esteemed colleagues in this room as well. I was wondering if one should not change our way of thinking around, let's argue, say, doctoral qualifications. Instead of getting that thesis, you say, I need a 30-pager, but I want more conceptual work. And, you know, the process to get to that, the methodology, how you engage with others, how you shape your thinking to almost push them through the methodology than the answer, because the ChatGPT and these things give you sentences and paragraphs, whereas we need to think about the recipe. Now, I know I'm training on the regulatory stuff now, but is that not maybe something to consider to get more focused?
Definitely.
Congested. But yeah, it's just a thought I had the other day.
Yeah, in fact, one would actually need to redevelop that for all types of disciplines, you know, because each discipline will have their own criteria for assessment and rigor. Yeah, but it's an interesting concept, you know. At the end of the day, one needs to continuously question what we do in education. I mean, there's a guy, some of you might know him, Jordan Peterson, said, you know, science as we know it is maybe about 100 years old. And, you know, if you go back maybe 300 years, but it's just a culture. It's going to fade away. What's next? You know, how did humanity survive without the science we have today? You know, so it's questions. I'm not choosing any position. I'm just saying questioning is what we need to do at the end of the day. So thanks for that as well.
Thank you, Kirstin. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, HB. Got 5 minutes left. I'm sure there's some esoterical question or something specific which you would like to ask Kirstin. Jane, I'm going to pick on you.
Did I not know you were going to do that?
You're right on my screen. Had to do that.
Yeah, of course you did. Yeah, I mean, Kirstin, thank you. You've given us a lot of food for thought in that. And I was also thinking about the assessing part to try and incorporate using ChatGPT. But I hadn't, I'm still a little bit nervous for putting it, say, onto the dissertation or the research module on the MBA. Yeah, so I know that Sasha, who's on the call here, has got an idea for a research paper. So you've given me a lot of ideas to think about there. But
you know what? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking, I'm really looking at the way we're assessing and how do we really foster the critical thinking because and getting students to understand that, it could be used as a tool to some degree. But they need to be learning about it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, again, I definitely don't have all the answers. I think collectively we might get to the answers. But what I found interesting is to attend some of these events and conferences where they say, if you submit a paper, it must be partly AI generated. So they force you to do that. And it's not that the paper is, it's about the research, it's about the process, to discover processes. So you submit a paper, it's 50%, 80% AI generated, but then you talk about what did you learn from the process. Those would be absolutely amazing, to attend.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. I want to share this link from UCC, really good resources. If you could just give me a second, then and it's beyond just thesis writing. It's actually using AI for all kinds of things in academia and how to stay, ethical in the process. So there's the link. Have a look at that. There were over 200, as I said, over 200 participants in this project.
Right. Kirstin, maybe just to wrap up, I know that when you're presenting on your slides, you mentioned the other training that you do. I am very aware that this was an introductory session that you were sharing. Do you want to just mention, just for the last couple of minutes before we close, anything that you want to focus on there?
Yeah, what I can say is that Worldwide Information Services is a reputable organization that really specializes in information resources. And last year, around April, I think they started the WIS Academy, and it's to provide additional services. And so currently the WIS Academy services about 11 university clients in South Africa, ranging from business schools, private universities, merger universities, technical universities. And it's got these sort of one hour workshops which talk to specific things like, let's say, EndNote. I'm involved in a lot of the research capacity building part. I've got a series of workshops that can take us, especially PhD students, from knowing nothing about scientific writing to being ready to write a proposal. There's also the series on using AI for different things. It's on topic discovery, academic writing, copyright, and using it in optimizing statistical analysis. And then there's also a Librarian Leadership Academy, which we are working on. We just had our first client, which was Namibia University. But the whole idea is to really supply stakeholders at these universities with any sort of research capacity building. I know academics are extremely loaded. They don't have time for mentoring always. And so the WIS Academy, can support that. We have, I think, about 10, people working in the program. I do a lot of that, but we've got specialists in Atlas TI, in SPSS, all kinds of things. But if you want to visit the WIS Academy, by all means, go and have a look, and we can tailor any sort of workshop or program. But there's also the individual workshops where you pay, per person. But have a conversation if you're interested, and we can take it from there.
Brilliant. Thank you for that so much. So we've come to the end of our session. Kirstin, thank you so much. We really appreciate everything that you have shared with us here today. There was a question from Otapani about the slides. We are not sharing the slides, but we will be sharing the recording if you request it. I can email it to you if you can send it to me on just ann@sabsa.coza. I can send it directly to you. And I'll just put in my thing in the chat. And so we hope to see you soon at the next webinar. We're obviously focusing, SABSA focuses on webinars and areas of interest that our faculty and the people that we work with would like to see more about. So send your ideas through to us and we can perhaps facilitate that for you. But on behalf of SABSA, the South African Business Schools Association, and all the people that are here in the room today, Kirstin, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.